Professor Abul Barkat is a Dhaka University professor and now in jail. He wrote an article where he said that in 30 years from now, in 2016 he wrote it, there will be no Hindus left in Bangladesh. It's an Islamist attack, you know. I have been surprised because I did not know he's such a good politician. I think he's a fantastic politician. He's a very bad statesman.
Indian journalist Deep Halder's recent CNN News 18 interview regarding Bangladesh's 2024 uprising demands scrutiny. Not for what it reveals about Bangladesh, but for what it demonstrates about how authoritarian narratives persist even after regimes fall. Halder frames his colleague Shahidul Hasan Khokon's flight from Bangladesh as evidence of rising radicalism, but conveniently omits crucial context. Journalists who spent years amplifying regime propaganda naturally face consequences when the regime collapses. This isn't persecution for truth-telling. It's accountability for complicity. The framing of guilt obscures a more fundamental question.
To be honest with you, I think the basis of the book is guilt on my part. Because like you mentioned, I wrote the book with Jaideep Mazumdar and Shahidul Hasan Khokon.
Were they documenting extremism or manufacturing consent for authoritarianism? The most egregious claim involves citing Professor Abul Barkat's prediction of no Hindus left in Bangladesh in 30 years.
Professor Abul Barkat is a Dhaka University professor and now in jail. He wrote an article where he said that in 30 years from now, in 2016 he wrote it, there will be no Hindus left in Bangladesh.
This apocalyptic projection ignores that 12 to 15 million Hindus currently live in Bangladesh. That demographic shifts reflect complex economic migration patterns affecting all communities, and that such fear-mongering has historically served authoritarian interests. Dictators worldwide position themselves as protectors of minorities to justify repression. Hasina employed this strategy effectively for 15 years while simultaneously allowing communal violence when politically expedient. Genuine minority protection requires rule of law and democratic institutions. Precisely what Hasina systematically dismantled. Halder's characterization of the July-August protests as an Islamist attack rather than spontaneous uprising represents a fundamental distortion of documented events.
This is a very specific kind of messaging that you are putting out. It's an Islamist attack, you know.
Students began peaceful protests in June over discriminatory quota policies, a legitimate governance issue. Violence escalated only after government forces killed dozens of unarmed protesters. This is cause and effect, not religious extremism. Yes, Jamaat-e-Islami was present, but so were leftist unions, civil society groups, and ordinary citizens. The presence of Jamaat doesn't invalidate a movement any more than extremist participation in any large protest, delegitimizing broader grievances. His treatment of Muhammad Yunus exemplifies the interview's analytical failures. Calling Yunus a bad statesman who enables radicals to maintain power requires evidence.
I have been surprised because I did not know he's such a good politician. I think he's a fantastic politician. He's a very bad statesman. So he realized that if he lets radicalists be, he can continue to be in power.
Specific policies, concrete examples, documented decisions, none are provided. Yunus inherited a country where 1,500 plus people had just been killed and institutions had been hollowed out by 15 years of autocracy. Managing this transition at 84-year-old deserves critical evaluation. Certainly, but not baseless in either.
There's a Pakistanization of Bangladesh, not always the Islamization of Bangladesh, though that's there.
The Pakistanization narrative reveals neo-colonial assumptions underlying the entire interview. Bangladesh asserting sovereignty and rejecting client state status isn't religious extremism, it's self-determination. Bangladeshis have legitimate grievances about water sharing agreements, trade imbalances, and political interference. framing these concerns as anti-India sentiment, leading inevitably to pro-Pakistan radicalization, denies Bangladesh the possibility of charting its own independent course. This binary thinking, aligned with New Delhi or aligned with Islamabad, erases Bangladeshi agency entirely. Perhaps most revealing is what Halder omits. 500 plus extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, rigged elections, imprisoned opposition leaders, murdered journalists, and systematic corruption under Hasina's rule. These aren't minor details. They're the context that explains why 170 million people rose up. Erasing this history allows Halder to frame the uprising as irrational extremism rather than rational response to systematic oppression. Bangladesh will undoubtedly face challenges building democratic institutions after the authoritarian rule. Extremist elements will attempt exploitation. Minority protection requires vigilance, but these legitimate concerns doesn't validate Haldar's core narrative that removing a dictator was a mistake orchestrated by radicals and foreign powers. This interview serves overlapping agendas, justifying India's support for Hasina's regime, delegitimizing Bangladesh's democratic transition, and rehabilitating the reputations of journalists who backed authoritarianism. What it doesn't serve is truth, journalistic integrity, or respect for Bangladeshi self-determination. The students who risked everything for democracy deserve better than conspiracy theories from commentators who faced none of their dangers while supporting the very system they fought to dismantle.